If a group of black 15-year-olds go into Nando's in Brixton and smash the place up, is that okay?
So let's shut down.
Is that okay?
So let's
but when the
shut down private
Bullingdon
schools.
group,
So let's shut down private
including
schools,
David
because that will
Cameron,
improve things.
including Boris Johnson, that's
then
what
next,
they did.
what
The
comes
Bullingdon
next?
Club
You're not allowed
in
to
Oxford
teach anything
University.
good to your
They
child.
went to university. They went into restaurants and smashed the places up. They weren't arrested because they're above the law. How can they be criminals? They are rich. They are famous. They are the elite.
Do you actually have children yourself?
Yes, I have children myself.
So do you actually give them any good manners, any good,
Oh,
anything,
for fuck off.
anything good?
Really?
because
Who are
by
you?
your standards.
Content!
We will ask our fine Speaker's Corner questioner to begin us off.
Who will be the next Prime Minister? Will it be Kenneth Clarke or Jeremy Corbyn?
That's a very difficult. I know you're a chess player, and it's the sort of thing that you try and work out. It's purely speculative. It should be Corbyn. Will it be Corbyn? Probably not. I mean, I don't have any crystal ball, so I can't say that.
In itself, it's
So I can't answer that.
In itself, it's not important. What is important is what goes on from there. If that happens,
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking a few minutes ago about this question about Brexit. Essentially, the way I see it is this: there is a worldwide process of a division amongst the rulers of the world. And by the rulers of the world, I mean the capitalist class, that class which extracts wealth from the world's population by employing them for a wage and receiving the surplus they produce. And that class has different interest groups within it. There are dominant big powers, there are intermediate powers, there are subordinate, what you could call semi-colonial or ex-colonial countries that are still dominated by the wealthiest countries. Within the wealthiest countries, there are two main factions within capitalism. One faction, internationally, and that's where I think you have to understand the context of it, and I'll explain examples of how this is appearing in different countries, although in each country people seem to believe it's something specifically national. So a lot of people in Britain believe the discussion about Brexit or leaving the European Union is something unique to Britain, whereas I will try and show it is a global process of a division within the capitalist class itself. One section of capitalism, which you could say in the wealthiest capitalist country in the world, the United States of America, is divided between the Democratic Party, which is a traditional capitalist party, which tended to be based on industrial capitalism. Although historically, you mustn't forget, despite their appearance of being politically liberal, they were the ones who supported slavery in America, when the Republicans were against slavery. So it's not as simple as they seem to make out. They cloak themselves in a mantle of being progressive. So they are global in their orientation, which means they're more likely, look at Donald Trump. For all you can criticize Donald Trump for, he has not invaded any country since he came to power. Under Barack Obama, under Bill Clinton, under the Democratic Party, wars were no problem. Was under Tony Blair, who was effectively a lackey of the Democrats or the Republicans. He also went to war, although this is ostensibly a workers' party. In America, the globalist, and I'll use that term only for the sake of the discussion at this specific juncture, the American capitalists who like to engage with world economy to extract resources on a world scale based on open marketplaces and a global economic and political agenda, that is associated with the Democrats. Now, they also have this cover that they talk about that they're politically correct, that they stand for equality of the races, that they stand for equality of the sexes, that they stand for sexual liberation, that they stand for green policies. But actually they don't stand for any of those things. They stand for the upper middle class being free, but the rest of the population, well, they can go to the dogs as far as they're actually concerned. I mean, under Barack Obama, they talked about healthcare. What healthcare program? They talked about liberty and freedom and equality, and yet inequality exacerbated under Barack Obama. They talk about fighting racism. The condition of the black masses in America got worse under Barack Obama. So this talk about defending the rights of the people, it's a sham. And the present mechanism they use, one of the main axioms of the democratic capitalist part of the capitalist section of, or better said, the Democratic Party section of capitalism, one of the axioms they've got at the moment is the Green New Deal and green policies. What they really mean is the big tech companies like Bill Gates, Microsoft, like Google, like Facebook, these companies backed by multi-billionaires. There are three people, for example, Bezos, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg, the three richest men on earth. Between them, they have around £300,000 million personal wealth. Enough money, by the way, to resolve the question, if you believe in the story that man-made emissions are destroying the world, as you seem to get on television every single day. In fact, it's become a religious doctrine that you must believe this. And if you do not believe this, then you are somehow trying to destroy humanity.
Sorry, can I ask, how much they got? Millions?
Around 300 billion.
300 billion?
300,000 million personal wealth. Yeah? Those three individuals. Now, it was calculated. I don't think so. They don't become rich by giving charity to you, but they do have charitable wings. Bill Gates spends a lot of his time nowadays engaged in charity, but his charity is not really charity. His charity is a tax write-off, because if you own a big business and you have to pay taxes, well, the way you get around the taxes is you set up a charity, and then you pass the taxes that you would pay to the exchequer into your charity, and you write it off. But your charity can act in exactly the same way as a private company, de facto in reality. It might, for example, do research on artificial intelligence to solve the climate crisis. And Bill Gates and his companies are doing exactly that. And what they're trying to do, they're propagating, they're using Greta Thunberg and others in order to propagate the idea that they are the saviors of humanity. And all of us have to bow down and give our money. The United Nations yesterday released a statement saying they want a global Green New Deal. And that will cost, according to the United Nations, 1.7 million US dollars every single year. Your money to go to them. And because these companies can't make profit out of 5G, out of the Internet of Things, out of what's called fourth generation industrial revolution, which means drones flying around spying on you, which means turning your toaster into a machine connected to the internet, which means these smart meters in your house to control your electricity supply, which means putting thousands or millions and millions of wind farms around the world. Recently they published a report on the BBC website, to be fair, and the report showed that wind farms are releasing greenhouse gases 23,000 times more powerful than CO2. and they remain in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. And this is the green saviors of the universe. And these gases, SF6, is a poison. It's not a carbon dioxide. You see, nowadays you read in the news, they say carbon dioxide, the pollutant. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is the gas on which every single living species, flora and fauna, is totally and utterly dependent. There would be no life on Earth without carbon dioxide. And if you want to make plants grow, you pump carbon dioxide into a tent, and that makes plants grow 5, 6, 10 times faster.
They make the oxygen, right?
And plants, of course, produce the oxygen. One recent study by NASA showed that China and India, which are the two countries most commonly blamed for releasing CO2, and they say China must be controlled, India must be controlled, they're developing too fast, they're putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But NASA reported, you can just do a very simple search, 20 years NASA greening of the Earth. And you'll find in the last 20 years, it is China and India, the two countries emitting the most greenhouse gases, increase that is, the biggest increase. Those two countries are the countries that have experienced the greatest greening of the Earth. India and China, contrary to common thinking, and you can check it on the NASA website, have produced in the last 20 years an increase in green foliage equal to the entire Amazon rainforest in the last 20 years. And the only way you can really explain that is because by releasing increased amount of carbon dioxide, they have encouraged the growth of plants, which have conquered a huge area in China and India. So the Democratic Party is advocating this policy because the Democrats know that the world economy stands on the edge of a global economic crisis. And the way out of the crisis, as far as they are concerned, is a Keynesian prime pumping method. You pour money in to the private sector, paid for out of the taxes of the population, in order to fund a transfer of wealth to the richest people so they invest in new technology. And the technology they're investing in will extract 4 or 5 times as much resources from the earth that we need for our future generations. They will extract vast resources of essential minerals and also of fossil fuels out of the ground in order to fund harebrained schemes that none of us have ever agreed to. How many of you actually want drones the size of flies flying around and observing every single thing you do every day? How many of you actually want autonomous vehicles to be driving around on behalf of Uber? You do, good for you. That's one person.
Who's with me? Who wants self-driving taxis?
Self-driving taxi, who wants one? Hands up who's begging for a self-driving taxi. 2 of you. 2 of you.
But what's the cost, though? What's the cost?
Exactly,
Of
exactly.
£10 a journey?
having that? No, I don't mean that. I mean, what's the cost to people's
There's a
lives?
company actually.
Labour, the labour.
There's a
cost.
company just started up. You can read on the Financial Times 2 days ago. Look on their website. You get 1 article free per day, I believe. And you'll see there's a company called Bolt. And this company is presenting itself as the green alternative to Uber. And what they say is, along with Greta Thunberg and the green lob propaganda machine of the capitalist class of America and around the world, what they say is they say, we want 0 net emissions by 2030. 0 net emissions. Do they explain to you what they mean by that? What they mean by that is, if Al Gore or Greta Thunberg's mother or the camera crew that travelled with her across to America on the little
boat from the King of Monaco. Then, if they want to travel around the world, all you have to do is, if you're wealthy, you pay a bit more. If you're not wealthy, you won't be able to travel. They want to increase the price of transportation for the mass of the population. That is why, of course, we had the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests in France, because Macron, in alliance with this lobby of international capitalism, represented and dominated by the Democratic Party in the United States of America, he said the people of France must pay more taxes on their petrol, and in order to save the environment. What he doesn't do, however, is carry out policies that attack the largest multinational companies, French and international, that actually control the world economy. You can't have it two ways, you see. I had an argument with some people online yesterday. They said, you know, they're all this hysteria. No one can criticize anything that Greta Thunberg says. If you were to do that, you must be some misogynist white criminal who wants to destroy the future of the children. That's the argument they put. Greta Thunberg herself is an innocent child. She has been pressed into this by a machine, a global capitalist machine, dominated by the Democratic Party and the capitalists associated with it in America, big tech companies after the fourth industrial revolution being financed by your taxes. These people are pushing her to run around the world and make speeches in order to get the hearts and minds of young children around the world to demand, to protest and demand that this technology is introduced. A couple of days ago I saw this piece. ExxonMobil, one of the largest multinational fossil fuel companies in the world, advertising on Facebook, it says, "We have invented a device to capture carbon from the air." Capture carbon from the air with a machine, a giant factory to capture carbon from the air. A Swiss study by ETH University in Zurich, led by Professor Crowther. Crowther, by the way, one of his employees is a PhD student. I think it's Feinstein, I believe his name is. I'll correct it online. I haven't quite got the word right. This is a kid. He's now in his 20s. When he was 13, he was picked up by the United Nations as the representative fighting climate change. A 13-year-old. You don't remember him because his message was ignored. But he's now working with Professor Tim Crowther. Professor Tim Crowther published a report in July this year which showed the cheapest, fastest, most efficient mechanism for reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. If you want that, there's no harm in doing it. In reducing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, 200 billion gigatons can be reduced, sucked down, not by a machine, but by a plant called a tree. And they identified that's what a tree is. A tree is a machine, a living organism that sucks carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and produces oxygen out of it. Now, the fact of the matter is, Tim Crowther did a global study of the entire surface of the planet, and they identified areas that are not used for agriculture. And they showed that if you planted in those areas of the world trees, 1.2 million trees, you could suck down 2/3 of all the carbon dioxide that has ever been released by man. And so why don't they do it? How much will it cost? 240,000 million pounds. Peanuts. This street alone is worth around 3,000 million pounds. That street alone, Park Lane, if you sold the properties there, around 3,000 million pounds. So It's small change. And yet the United Nations yesterday called for an expenditure of £1.7 trillion every year to 2030. Why do they need all this money? Because it must be given to the tech companies who are manipulating the youth of the world to believe the world is going to be eradicated in 12 years' time until they save us. And in about a year's time, or 6 months' time, all these grand figures, Al Gore, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, all the high-tech lunatics. Elon Musk, don't forget, last month released one of his latest products. Perhaps you'll like one of these as well.
Just to go back quickly.
Just one second. One second. One.
Just plant trees and that's it. Solve.
Yes.
That's how simple you think it is.
That is the study carried out by Tim
All we need is trees.
Tim
All we
Crowther.
need is trees. That's it. That's the solution.
Look it on the internet now. Right? Look it on the internet now. ETH, Zurich University, Crowther, planting 1.2 trillion trees, 200 billion gigatons drawn down. Look it up now, and you will see.
It's obvious that planting trees would probably help, but it's not as easy as just planting
It is
trees.
the quickest, easiest, and cheapest means to reduce carbon in the atmosphere, and it's been costed at 240 billion pounds. No other solution has been posited which comes anywhere near to such a solution. And yet, that is not being carried out. Instead of this, we have harebrained, lunatic, stupid schemes being proposed across the world to make you feel guilty. Oh my God, I took an aeroplane trip. Oh my God, I've got a car. Oh my God, I drank from a plastic straw. None of these things. Oh my God, I need to buy this light bulb and not that one. Oh my God, I need a green sign on the dinner that I eat. Oh my God, I better not eat meat because that's destroying the world. All total and absolute bullshit. It will not. I've just answered.
What you think? Just plant trees. That's what you think. You just walk into the UN and say, just plant the trees, mate. Sort
My
it.
friend, the
Just
campaign
sort it, mate.
originated in the UN by a 13-year-old that they had picked up in the 1990s to be the representative of fighting climate change. But since that time, it was an enormous development in high technology. The fourth industrial revolution, G3, G4, or 4G, 3G, 5G. And this has created an appetite amongst the capitalist class, this section of the capitalist class that supports the Democratic Party, to foster a delusion within the population that they have some technical solution to climate change. This is utter and complete bullshit. The second wing of capitalism, the Trump, Boris Johnson, Bolsonaro, Modi wing of capitalism, this wing of capitalism is reverting to the nation state as the founding principle of its existence. Its appearance is the Brexit vote. Its appearance is Donald Trump's election, the building of a wall, the claim America first. So it withdraws from the global economic conquest in the sense of engaging in military activity, in a globalist economic perspective, and it engages instead in trade wars with its enemies, with the primary objective, which by the way is a bipartisan objective, to declare an economic war against China, to prevent China from economically developing, or India, come to that matter, long term, from economically developing. And this tendency uses nationalist rhetoric. It's a section of capitalism based partly on finance capital, partly on leaning on sections of the middle class who have lost out to global capitalist transformation, and pretending to be a representative of the working class. This is what Bolsonaro did in Brazil. This is what Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage have done in Britain. This is what Donald Trump has done in the United States of America. This is what Modi does in conjunction with the RSS, a fascist grouping in India. The same process in Hungary and Poland. An important trend in that direction is also reflected in the National Front in France and also in the rise of the AfD in Germany. And the right wing, this Austrian party, the People's Freedom Party in Austria. So there are two strands within capitalism, fighting each other. That is what is also represented by the Supreme Court and Parliament opposing the executive and government branch in Britain. It is the beginning of the breakdown of the unity of the capitalist class. And that breakdown of the unity of capitalism leans and tries to sway the masses in one direction or another. The Democrats appeal to the petty bourgeois, the lower middle classes, the middle classes, in order to stimulate support for their program of economic and political domination of the world. And Donald Trump and his gang appeal to the poor sections of the working class and also to the upper strata of the middle class in order to galvanize support for their reactionary agenda of nation first and fuck the rest of the world, which is basically what their policy are.
What would you try and make the masses?
Neither of them.
What would you do then?
Neither of those policies,
What would you do?
none of those policies are... I'm going to answer you. First, I want to clarify, Brexit or no Brexit, it is not...
No, I'm asking, are you such thing as like a Marxist socialist?
Yes, I think you know that.
I know, but I'm just making sure the crowd know. It's
Well,
just that I'm trying to
what
push
does it
out.
mean?
What
You
does it
see,
mean? It means that you all share, you all sit around and go, you have some, I have some.
well, that's actually not what it means.
Oh, okay,
So that's unfortunate, but never mind. A lot of people think that's what it means, so I can understand why you think that. Now, what I advocate is quite simple, is that capitalism, and that means the largest companies in the world, which produce for profit and dominate the entire planet. For example, a Swiss study published in New Scientist by Vitali and Khoo, Vitali et al., about 4 or 5 years ago, studied the power of the largest companies in the world, and they showed that of the global multinational companies, there are 140 which control 40% of the world trade, of the world economy and world trade. And there are 740 companies that control 80% of world trade. Socialism means taking over those companies, putting them in public ownership, and democratically planning what is done with the resources of the planet, physical and material, human and material. What is done with those resources must be democratically planned by the people, for the people. So that's my response to what he says. Other question?
Will the closing of private schools help anybody?
I mean, the closing of private schools has always been an issue because there is within the socialist movement a powerful concept that the gentleman here naturally expressed, and which is a very common expression, that private schools are wrong because they privilege a section of the population and the rest of the population have worse conditions, which is perfectly true. I took a school group from Camberwell on a walking tour this week, and the level of intellect of those kids compared with a private school I took earlier in the year is lower. Not because those kids are more stupid, but because the training they receive in a private school is superior. And so Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party have adopted a policy which advocates the abolition of private schools. I happen to agree with that because I think all school kids should have their level raised. But the more important question is not what grades they get at school, but to create a new form of education. And I believe this is lies underneath the central problem. It's not private or public school. The question is, what is school for? Now, the reason this school, a few days ago, I think they had a little bit of a problem grasping what I was arguing and what I was explaining, is because in their mindset, they came from Camberwell, mostly black kids. Their aspiration is to escape the environment they're in and to raise themselves up economically. And unfortunately, that is not the purpose of education, although in modern society, most people think it is. Even at university, most kids, if you ask them, why are you studying what you're studying, they will turn around and say, because it will get me a good job. The fact of the matter is, education is an end in itself. And at the centre of education, from your childhood, should be music and art. If you understand music and art, mathematics, science, culture, literature will all follow from that.
Can I just ask you a question? If you're a wealthy family, should you be allowed to hire private tuition at home?
Well, I mean, I am not a totalitarian.
Okay,
So the
where
fact
do
of the
you- where
matter
do you
is,
draw the line?
these people will do that.
No, but where do you draw
Therefore, I agree with your sentiment, which is, you are unlikely to make any big difference by abolishing private schools. That I think is true. So I agree with the action, but I do not believe it's likely to bring any significant result.
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean,
It's
if
not
I-
for
if
nothing
I am-
after all.
If I am intellectual, should I be allowed, by your standards, to teach my kids some good behaviours? Versus a single parent.
did I
in a-
argue against that?
No, but it's the same thinking. If you're going to stop private schools, then you're going to probably cut private tuition. Then you're going to say,
Well-
oh, actually, you know what? Even then, this family is probably a better intellectually, a little bit more advanced, and they should not teach their kids anything. And you know, we have to put them in line with a single parent.
I'm
Potentially
trying
black
to
family
explain
members.
what the root of the problem is.
But the root of the problem is not private education.
Exactly.
The root of the
I
problem
agree with
is
you. I said so a minute
single-parent
ago.
families who have been snowballing
single-parent
themselves.
families.
Well, no, the fact is, most of the poverty-stricken areas that you go to, it's not just because of
Yeah, but
bad
I'm talking
education.
about-
I myself come from a, quite a poor background. I don't have private education.
Yeah.
But I think, and for you to say people don't get good education to earn good, decent amount of money is totally incorrect.
I said they do
because
that.
Today,
I said they do that.
no, you said that shouldn't be.
I said that shouldn't be the
fact
purpose
is,
of
if you
education,
wanna
but
code,
it is.
Today, that everything's driven by technology. If you want to learn programming, you're not going to do that through art or listening
Of course
to
you
music.
are. Of course you are.
What, to learn programming or computer, you have
Music
to go to
is
school.
based on what?
Have you ever coded anything in your life?
Yes, I've coded. What about
It
it?
has nothing to do with music.
You think so?
Music may cause that.
My friend,
Mo-
what's your
music
objective?
may-
What's your objective? If you,
Music may help your
whenever
mind
I had to program for someone or make someone for something, I used to run quite a large computer training company. Whenever you had to do that, the first question you ask someone is, what do you want to do?
Or you were given,
Because
you're given what to do, but you had to code
No,
it
no,
up.
no, no, no. I'm not talking about some mechanical task. I'm saying,
You have to learn
what
the
do
task
you want?
first. If you can't speak
My
English,
friend.
you're not going to be able to respond in English. If you're going to learn, if the job demands you to speak French, you need to learn the basics words first. Stop playing
Yes,
games with your
yes.
words. You cannot deny the fact
No,
that
I'm asking you
need
this.
to learn the
Yes, but
task
programming
first.
is
You
no
cannot be
is no
hired as a
magnificent
chef
skill.
If you don't know what a
You
burger
click a couple
is.
of buttons, right? All
Man.
programmers will be
What are you talking
obsolete
about?
with artificial intelligence.
But until we get there,
All programmers.
until we get
We are there.
until
Last week, Google
artificial
created
intelligence has to be coded up by
Sorry?
someone.
What?
Artificial intelligence doesn't come from nowhere.
Exactly.
It has to be
Where
taught.
does it come from then?
Someone has to code
Where
up-
does it come from?
someone
It
has to
comes
do the
from an
modelling in
intellectual
mathematics.
inspiration,
Yes, that involves
an
going to
artistic
school, doing research
inspiration.
at university.
I want to do this. How do I do it? That's where it comes from.
Inspiration is important, but you need to learn the basic at school.
No,
and
in
university.
order
You
to
need do
code
research.
something, yes. But the
Yes.
coding is merely a mechanical task.
Yes, but
Just like
that
fitting
that
a
has to be
bolt
taught.
on a screw.
It has to be
It's a
taught.
well, it doesn't
can
have
ins-
to be
you can
taught.
inspire
In fact,
children
what you
to-
have to teach people,
you can-
obviously the case in your
can
case,
ins-
is that your task, your idea of what programming is, will be obsolete in
Your
2 years.
idea of society,
Therefore,
learn
think
arts and
bigger
music and
than what
sit
you're
there,
programming.
Do not do anything.
I
The
mean,
fact
I
is-
used to train people. They used to come to me and they say, I want to get, it was back in 1998. And I used to train people to use computers. I had 6,000 students in my college. And people would come to me and they say, oh, I want to learn how to become a Microsoft programmer on NT4. Do you think any of those skills have the slightest relevance today? Not one. Not one. I used
not
to
the
manage an NT4 server. I used to I ran, or I was a network manager at the Heiko satellite communication project in Hammersmith. That was a £5 billion investment project in geostationary satellites. We all had computers. There were programmers. There were planners. You know what happened to it? They spent £5,000 million on it, and then they scrapped the whole project. Scrapped the whole thing.
Well, what's your point?
So the point is this. What are you doing it for? There's no shortage of people who are capable of programming. Programming is a mechanical task. We are short of people who ask the question, why am I programming? What is this for? Who will it serve?
Man,
That's the question we have to ask.
You're totally ignoring how society economically runs.
I'm not.
There are certain
That's what I'm taking
there are
account of.
certain
That's what you're
industries-
not taking
Man,
account of.
You're ignoring the fact that there are certain industries that demand certain type of jobs.
Yes,
These
of course.
industries change
And
over
they may
time.
well be
Certain jobs
totally
are automated,
and
certain-
absolutely useless.
Well, yes, over time things
I
change.
was saying
That's
earlier
why,
on-
That's why transferable skills matter and people need to learn
No,
new
that's
skills.
just
and you have to move on.
labour market bullshit.
What do you mean labour market bullshit?
The question
How would you-
we have to
how would
ask
you-
ourselves-
How would you suggest society to be run? We should just sit
Society
around,
should
sit
be
around
run
and have a coffee.
so all technologies lead to advances and
Someone has to
improve.
develop them,
Can I
right?
answer you?
Yeah, go ahead.
All technologies that human beings are inspired to create are based on a vision of what we are doing and why. You see, when was the greatest flourishing? Before modern times. When was the greatest flourishing? Before the Enlightenment. When was the greatest flourishing in ideas, in philosophy, in thought and culture? When was it? Before modern times, before 1640.
Fact is, we have the
When
lowest-
was it? No, before
We
1640.
have the lowest level of poverty. We have the
Hang on a
best
minute.
standard
I
of
asked you a
living.
question.
Man, who cares when it was? The
It was
fact is,
ancient Greece. You
people
care
have-
because you raised the question.
People have now a better
Now
standard
ask
of
yourself
living.
this. Why was
That's what
it
matters.
ancient Rome, ancient Greece? Why did they flourish in art, culture, civilization, philosophy, mathematics, politics? Why did society flourish then? Because society was ruled by people who, as you said, sat around and discussed with each other. They did no work, they discussed with each other. They philosophized, they debated, they argued. And the people who did the work were slaves. Now we must make machinery, technology, artificial intelligence and robotics into our slaves. They must be our slaves, and we must be liberated from drudgery of work. We must be liberated from the drudgery and the idiocy of waking tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, jumping on the tube and sitting in front of a computer to make a website for some stupid company talking bullshit to make profits for their CEO. What for? If you ask the people working in 80% of the workplaces in London, yea, 80% of the workplaces in the world, they will all admit to you, if they are honest and they remember their childhood when they were asked, what do you want to do when you get older? None of them, I say 80%, would not want to do what they do now. And 80% of the people in work today do not want to do and do not like doing what they do. They might like the fact there's some people at work they can talk to. They might like the fact that when they go to work, there's some camaraderie. They might like the fact that they're challenged every now and again to do something that might be a bit interesting. But look around London, for God's sake. This is one of the citadels of world capitalism. Walk down the street here for 5 minutes. Look into the shop, Primark. There's a guy standing on the door. Are there any thieves? There's people standing behind the counter. Yes, madam. Put it in your bag. Would you like a bag? Yes. Would you pay by card? Yes. All day long. Is that a human being or a robot? They're doing the job of a robot.
Do thieves do not
Then,
exist?
so what?
Do thieves not exist?
Why do
You
thieves
need
exist?
a security job, no?
Why do thieves exist?
Man,
Because the
we've gone from
system
lack
of
education.
capitalism
You've gone
deprives people deliberately of the resources available to them. Mankind has produced a world technically in abundance, We have the capacity to feed, clothe, house the world's population, to educate every child in the world to the level of the wealthiest and most powerful capitalist countries in the world. We have the capacity to train every child at the level of Eton, Harrow, Cambridge, Oxford, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Princeton and Harvard. We have the capacity to teach every child, man and woman on earth from birth to that level. But we don't do it because they want to make you slaves. Slaves to the market, slaves to the money, chasing after money every single day to pay your friggin' rent to a sweaty landlord so they can pay their mortgage to the bank, so the banks can rob the entire planet. That's the reality of the world.
Sold to people that are actually slaves.
No, it's a description which allows them.
Every employee is a slave.
Wage
It's an
slaves.
absolute insult
Slaves
to those people that
I
are
said
in
slaves
literal shackles.
to capitalism.
No, you said they're slaves.
And by the way,
You said they're
there are
slaves.
more physical slaves, more real slaves than there were in ancient Greece
Yeah.
or that there
Yeah.
were
That's
in the
right.
United
That's
States of
true.
America.
That's true.
Today, there are more slaves than there were when North
Chinese
America,
girls
when
that do
40%
manicure.
of North
You're
America.
right, yeah.
Many of them are.
Well,
Yes.
standard
There's
of
lots
living.
slaves.
That's not what I'm
Within-
talking about.
within a mile
And
of
you're
there.
right to take me up if that's what I said. I'll check online later on. However, I was referring quite clearly to a specific type of slavery.
Man, you do realise.
Slavery to stupidity, slavery to the market, slavery to conditions not created by you and not chosen by you. And yet, because the conditions, we're born into them. We believe they're natural and normal, like this man is now presenting. He's presenting as if all these things are normal. All these things are natural. They are
What's
not
natural?
natural.
What's natural?
They are not normal. They are
Wanting your
creations
kids
of
to
a
be
specific
educated.
socio-economic
Is wanting
system.
your kid to
I
be-
explained.
is that
All
wrong?
human beings can be raised to the level of an Aristotle. All human beings.
So no,
There is no one on earth who can't learn 7 languages.
You suggest that
There's
private
no one on
schools are
earth
wrong.
who can't learn to
You
program.
say we should
But there's
shut
no
down
need to
private
program
schools. Why
because
would
the
you?
My
Am I
friend.
wrong to hire like a private tuition for my child?
My friend,
Is
you are
that wrong?
thinking microscopically.
Is that wrong?
I understand that television,
Answer the
radio,
question.
politicians
Answer the
want to
question,
keep
man.
you talking in microscopic, irrelevant questions. I am trying to raise your level of a vision of the world,
Man.
to see where we can go,
Should you-
not where we are stuck.
Should you have the option to educate your child with the best teacher?
My friend, I said, you see,
Yes or no?
what do you mean with the best teacher?
Like if
We
there are
have-
better teachers out there who demand a higher wage, because
I'm sorry, my friend. I really don't know what you're talking about. We have the internet. Every single human being on earth pretty much has a mobile phone. Most of them are smartphones. You can click
most
on
of
there.
them are not
Hang on, let me
interested.
finish. Let me
They're more
finish.
interested
Let
in
me
Instagram
finish what I'm
and
saying.
shaking their ass
And it will
naked.
negate what you're
What are you
arguing.
talking about?
It will negate your
Oh, yeah, go
hostility.
ahead.
You can click on there and there are geniuses of science, art, technology who can teach you. Who can teach not one person in a private class,
Right.
but millions or billions of people on earth. And that is why the idea that you are talking about, my kid gets private tuition. The only reason people do
There
that
are some
is
16-year-olds
because
running around stabbing each other to death. What about
there
them?
are.
Who's responsible for that?
Well, generally, I mean,
Oh, what happened to your fucking art that was supposed to inspire them
My
to be a
friend-
better human being?
Hey,
My
calm
friend.
down.
Because
My
education is not
my friend,
important.
let me
no
answer you.
F word.
Let me answer you.
This is a
We live in a
civilized
country.
You're lying. You're
We
manipulating
live in a
your whole
country.
narrative
We live in,
and chatting crap. That
We live in a
everybody
country.
works for no
You
reason.
chat
We live in a
crap.
country.
Shut up.
Please.
my friend,
Shut
we
up,
live in a
please.
country dominated by its history. Right? And this particular country has one of the most violent, barbarous histories, mistreating, murdering, slaughtering, nowadays with laser-guided missiles,
So that explains.
millions of people.
So that explains
does
why
Russia.
16-year-olds
And
are stepping
therefore,
into
and
that.
therefore,
So does any
And
empire
Miss
that's ever
Roman-
if it's
existed.
okay,
Roman
if it's okay for Prince Harry to go to Afghanistan and fire submachine guns at ragheads, as he calls them, why should a kid in Brixton not think it's okay to stab someone
Man,
for some money?
we are talking about how people are using
Wait.
their phone to educate
Wait.
and inspire themselves, yeah?
I said it's possible.
So why is it that we have
I'm
16-year-olds
trying to
stabbing
raise
each
your
other?
argument.
No, you're
I'm
not
not trying to
raising it.
seem to.
You're running
Why?
away
Because
from it.
humanity.
Because the fact is,
Humanity
it's not,
under
it's not the
capitalism
technology that
is a
dictates what we choose to
barbarous, murderous system. We live in a barbarous,
So you don't want to
murderous
accept that
system.
some of us are fucking animals.
Then leave it.
You
It
see,
goes
last
on
week,
better.
you may remember.
accept this guy.
You may remember last week. One sec. One sec. Last week, you may.
You don't kill anybody.
My friend, you never heard of the Spanish Inquisition?
Well,
Obviously, you know nothing.
Before they kill themselves before, whatever.
Man,
They're killing themselves. They throw
history
people
has
into
been
water.
bloody.
My
The
friend,
whole
our
planet.
culture has been shaped
Catholics, nobody kill
for hundreds of
nobody.
years
Catholics don't kill.
by the Catholic Church.
No.
The Catholic
It's
Church,
so-called. This is so
the
called.
Catholic Church,
so-called Catholic.
ingrained in the minds of the
No
people,
way.
the sort of thing that we see today.
Catholics kill nobody.
I'm trying to answer you.
Yeah, but sorry.
The sort of thing we see
Don't give me
today.
Inquisition because they kill
Head
themselves
chopped
before.
off
They
by
throw
Taliban.
children. Now this
Head
kind of 200,
chopped-
they throw children
Sorry.
into water. They
Sorry,
kill
let me answer
themselves.
you. Let
Did
me
you
answer
say
you.
that? Did you say
Man,
that?
I'm about to answer you.
Yeah.
So, where do you think, like, IS, you know, when they chop someone's head off, you know, Jihadi John holds it up in the air. You don't think that's something they learned from the Catholics?
No way. They learn it from
Same
the
tradition, my
murderers.
friend.
They learn it
What,
from
are you
the
telling
Same
me?
murderers.
book.
Are you telling me?
Same
Hold on a
book,
second.
same background,
Hold on a
same
second.
background, my
You
friend.
can blame, you
on a
can blame
second.
anybody.
Hold
Same
on.
tradition.
What, a stoning
Comes
woman
from the
to
same
death?
Who
tradition.
was killed there?
Stoning a woman
Abraham.
to death.
Who was killed
Abraham,
there?
Stoning a woman
Jesus,
to death is
Jesus,
the
he's
Who
a
was hanged
prophet.
there? Who was
right?
hanged there?
Why is this-
Catholics.
Abraham,
How could you
was
father
hanged
of
there?
Islam,
this guy say?
father of Christianity.
Who was
Same
hanged
tradition,
there?
my
Who was
friend.
hanged
What about
there?
stoning women to death
Hundreds
for
of
adultery?
Catholics was hanged just
What
there
about
because
hanging people
away.
because they're
For
homosexual?
My friend, you may remember Jesus Christ tried to stop a woman being killed. How was she to be killed? Stoning.
Yes, don't
Right? So,
That still goes on
don't
in
tell me.
Afghanistan.
Don't tell me it's got no common tradition. Same common tradition.
Man, what does that have to do with your narrative of this music and art to inspire the young generation to become, you know, highly
I
advanced?
said that should be the foundation of education. That's what I said.
Even if it is some young children choose alternative paths. Even if it is the case,
Look,
young
am I
kids
disputing that someone got
Catholics
knifed
were
yesterday?
scared
No.
for years and
Is that what
years.
you're trying to argue?
can't
Because it's a
blame
pretty
Catholics.
low level of discussion, if that's your
My
argument.
point is,
Are you
good
saying
education.
someone got killed the other
My point
day?
is
Therefore,
young-
we must
Man,
have private education.
My
For
point
fuck's
is,
sake.
my
What are
point
you, an
is, good
idiot?
education can make a difference.
What?
Good parenting and education can make
Well,
a
of
difference.
course it does. We've got Boris Johnson.
So why don't you
Right.
focus on good parenting and good
Well,
family?
did Boris
rather than-
Johnson not get a good
rather than
education?
this phone that
Did
supposedly
Rees Mogg not get
inspires
a good
everyone to become
education?
good?
Did David Cameron not get a good education?
Oh, what-
It doesn't
what
make
about
them
Labour?
decent human beings.
Man, the fact is, good education makes a difference.
So
good
the
family
question you have
upbringing
to
makes a
ask
good
yourself
difference.
is what produces a good human being?
A good parent.
Not a
good
parasite,
a good mom
not a
and dad,
crook,
a good mom and
not a
dad for
gangster,
start. A
dressed
good mom
up
and dad for
in
a
posh
start.
clothing.
Why-
That's what you've got.
Why does it have to be
Good
the obligation of the
parenting.
internet
If a
to
kid,
bring up young children?
if a kid,
Just nothing more
if a
than
kid,
class hate to it.
if a kid
course it is.
goes in a shop in
Because
Brixton,
Rees-Mogg's a bit posh,
if a
we
kid
hate
goes
it.
into a shop in Brixton,
have to
or a
describe it
group,
with those
if a group
words.
of black
Nothing other than
15-year-olds
class war.
go into Nando's in Brixton and smash the place up,
Oh, so let's
is that
not-
okay?
So let's shut down
Is that
private
okay?
schools. So let's
But
shut
when the
down private
Bullingdon
schools.
group,
So let's shut down private
including
schools,
David
because that will
Cameron,
improve things.
including Boris Johnson. That's
then
what
next,
they did,
what
the
comes
Bullingdon
next?
Club.
You're not allowed
In
to
Oxford
teach anything
University,
good to your
they
child.
went to university, they went into restaurants and smashed the places up. They weren't arrested because they're above the law. How can they be criminals? They are rich, they are famous, they are the
Do you
elite.
actually have children yourself?
Yes, I have children myself.
So do you actually give them any good manners, any good, you know,
Oh, for
anything,
fuck off.
anything good?
Really?
because
Who are
by
you?
your standards,
Who are
you're not
you?
allowed.
Who are you?
You shouldn't be telling them anything.
I don't know
They
where you're
should
getting
just-
this from.
They should,
You're
they should-
inventing an argument to attack.
Oh, that's what you've been doing
You're
for
standing.
the past
No, on the
half hour.
contrary, I've dealt with all your arguments.
Just randomly. Oh,
Having said
everyone
that,
should
it's
be going
pissing
by
down
the
with
internet.
rain. We've had a good debate. Unfortunately, you got very angry. I don't know why you got angry with me.
You got very
Probably something I did, something I said. I can't help that.
Because what you're saying doesn't make sense.
Well, it does make sense. You just don't agree with it.
Shutting down private schools doesn't mean everything's going to be more.
As
equal.
I said, this was a totally peripheral argument to the discussion. I explained what my point of view was. I said it's kind of irrelevant, but I understand why they're doing it. But you hooked onto that because you want to suck the discussion down to the level of the stupidity they talk about on television and on the radio. I'm not going to play that game because Speaker's Corner is not here to talk shit that they talk on telly. We have enough of that.
You said shutting down private schools will bring
I
about
didn't
more
say
equality.
I didn't.
And so then I asked, what about private
I-
tuition?
We've had this already. Look on the video. You went over it. We went over it. I answered it in 2 minutes. You wanted to drag the whole thing around that. I'm not interested in private or non-private
he
schools.
jumped to the Roman
I'm
Empire
interested
of
in
art and
raising
music.
the level of education, of humanity, not of some kid, your kid or my kid,
Can you
but of
accept-
humanity.
Can you accept it starts from a good mum and dad?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. What is a good mum or dad? You put someone in a shithole,
Right.
they're likely to have great difficulty in being a good mum or
tell you what,
dad.
a lot
in
of good
India,
people have come out of
India,
this-
a lot
come
of
out of this
perfectly
shithole
good
because
mums
of
or
good
dads
parents.
sell their
A lot of
children
good
to make
people have
money.
come out, a lot of
Right?
good people have come
So
out
what
of
are you
this
talking
shithole
about?
Sorry,
just
you
because of good
mentioned
parents.
What you're saying is, and this is what your prejudice
You're a very dangerous
This is
person,
what your
you know
prejudice is. What you're really
ideas are
saying
dangerous.
is,
I've not heard any prejudice
if you don't mind me explaining,
Right.
and you don't mind taking one on the nose, if you even if you disagree with it, intellectually that is, what you're really saying is that those who are wealthy and powerful and have a good posh accent and live in big houses are there because they deserve it because their parents are good.
That's not what I said.
That's what you're saying.
That's not
If
what
you've got
I
lots
said.
of money, if you've got lots of money and you can afford to pay
I'll
for your
let your
children
audience
to get a good
decide.
education and teach them to talk properly and know how to communicate with the right people in the right way, somehow they're more deserving than someone who isn't in those circumstances.
That's not what I said.
That's essentially
That's not what I
what
said.
your argument
That's not what I
is.
said.
I didn't want to waste my time
That's
on
not
such a
what I said.
stupid argument, though.
I wanted to
Thanks
ask
very
about
much, Heiko.
something you said earlier. You were talking to us about what the globalist governments are doing with the trade wars.
Yes. Well,
you-
no, what I was arguing was there is a tendency that's called globalism, which is reflected in the Democratic Party, the New Green Deal, and all the bullshit that surrounds the promotion of the Fourth
Patriotism
Industrial
and
Revolution.
nationalism.
The other element was the Trump nationalist capitalists who are advocating trade wars and so on. They are both capitalist wings ruling the world but fighting each other. That fact that they are fighting each other is an indication of the impending worldwide revolution.
That's what I was going to
Yes,
ask.
because-
I was going to ask
because
you,
the
could
fact
it
that-
manifest into a physical
Yes.
conflict?
When the elite fight each other, like in Britain, the court, the judiciary, the legislature, the parliament fights the executive, the government is misusing the Queen and so on and so forth. When this happens, it's a reflection of a breakdown in the unity of the capitalist class. And that means that they will fight it. They'll try and turn you all one against another. There'll be violence on the street, far-right lunatics, like we've seen at Speaker's Corner over the last year or two. There'll be fighting on the streets. And then there's the ultra so-called liberals who claim that everybody who disagrees with them is a fascist. And they'll be fighting each other on the streets. But
So we have capitalism.
underneath the surface, there will be an awakening of the working class. Because the working class is what everything's based upon. It is the goose that lays the golden egg.
But they're all
Everything
slaves, like you said.
comes from them.
But they're all slaves.
Everything. I
They're all
said,
enslaved.
that's why slaves, you see, they rise up. Not literal slaves, as you correctly pointed out, but slaves under a system. Wage slaves. Slaves to earning money to live from. Not self-driven. Workers acting on their own creativity. Don't forget this. Where are we heading, technically? We're heading to a world, and Elon Musk, last week he did this, put 1,000, or 2 weeks ago, put 1,000 probes in someone's brain so they could control. He said, it's for people who've got disability. But what he really wants, and he said so openly, is to have a human brain interface. Artificial cyborgs. What he wants to make us all into cyborgs who will work for them just the same as we don't even realize we're working a lot of the time. For example, if I search on the internet, I produce wealth for Google. I produce wealth for Mark Zuckerberg when I click on Facebook. And they are using that artificial intelligence to prepare the ground to create a sort of technical totalitarianism where they control the world's population and where the work of people will be downloaded out of their brain when they think it and will be the intellectual property of a tiny elite, the slave owners, if you like, of the future, who will seek to control the cyborgs of the world. That's the vision of Elon Musk. That's the vision of Bill Gates. That's the vision of these fourth industrial revolution lunatics who claim they're trying to save the planet. They are not trying to save their planet. They're trying to plunder and control the planet. And we can become conscious and aware and stop it. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you next week.
Thank you, very good. Excellent. What a nugget.
Content over everything. From your Berlin. Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
And again, if you're
listen,
that's okay. A pastoral mindset automatically categorizes the things in a very different way than someone who is living in an industrial society. So potatoes and knives, in their mind, makes perfect sense. And if the IQ test of potatoes and knives today